The elevator doors closed with a final condemning thud as Claire Matthews clutched her cardboard box of desk trinkets, still in shock from the words that had shattered her 5-year career. "We're downsizing the marketing department, effective immediately." Her fingers trembled against the smooth cardboard as the reality of unemployment crashed over her like an icy wave. 3 months of rent saved, 6 student loan payments looming, and absolutely no job prospects in a city that seemed to be laying people off faster than hiring them. Claire stepped out into the bright spring sunshine that seemed to mock her current situation. She had expected to feel tears, anger, anything but instead, there was just a hollow numbness as she wandered toward the small park across from her now former office building. Finding an empty bench, she set down her box of belongings and pulled out her phone to make the calls she was dreading. "Mom, hey. No, everything's not fine." Claire's voice cracked as she finally allowed herself to feel the weight of what had just happened. "I lost my job today. Budget cuts." Her mother's sympathetic cooing did little to ease the knot in her stomach. As Claire ended the call with promises to keep her parents updated, she noticed a man in a tailored suit sitting on a nearby bench, typing furiously on his laptop. Something about his focused intensity caught her attention, his brow furrowed in concentration, seemingly oblivious to the world around him. Until he wasn't. "Rough day?" he asked, looking up from his screen, his deep voice startling her. Claire quickly wiped away a stray tear. "That obvious, huh?" "The cardboard box is usually a dead giveaway," he replied with a kind smile that reached his striking blue eyes. "Layoffs?" "Yep. 5 years at Pritchard Media. Gone in a 5-minute meeting." She attempted a laugh that came out more like a choked sob. The stranger closed his laptop and turned to face her fully. "Xavier Sutton," he introduced himself, extending a hand. "Claire Matthews," she replied, shaking his hand briefly. "Sorry for the public meltdown." Xavier's smile was warm and genuine. "No apology needed. Mind if I join you? I've been on both sides of that cardboard box scenario." Claire nodded, surprised at her willingness to talk to a stranger. There was something disarmingly sincere about him. He wasn't overly handsome in the conventional sense, but his features were strong and balanced, dark brown hair neatly styled, a strong jawline softened by the kind expression in his eyes. "So, what's your field?" Xavier asked, gesturing to the box beside her. "Marketing, brand management specifically. I helped companies find their voice." Claire sighed, running a hand through her auburn hair. "At least I did until about 30 minutes ago." "That's a valuable skill," Xavier commented, his interest seemingly genuine. "Any prospects lined up?" "Not yet. It all happened so fast. I should probably update my LinkedIn and start the depressing cycle of job applications." She glanced at his laptop. "What about you? Playing hooky from work to enjoy the sunshine?" Xavier laughed, a pleasant sound that made Claire smile despite herself. "I have the luxury of a flexible schedule. I do investment consulting." "Ah, so you're the guy who tells people what to do with their money when they actually have some," Claire joked, then immediately regretted it. "Sorry, that came out more bitter than intended." "No offense taken," Xavier assured her. "You're not wrong. Though I prefer to think of it as helping people make their money work for them, whatever amount they have." They fell into surprisingly easy conversation, with Xavier asking thoughtful questions about her career, and Claire finding herself genuinely interested in his insights about the city's business landscape. He spoke with confidence but without arrogance, a combination Claire found refreshing. An hour passed before Claire realized how much time had gone by. "I should probably head home and start figuring out my next move," she said reluctantly. "Before you go," Xavier reached into his wallet and pulled out a business card. "I know a few people in marketing at various companies. Let me make some calls for you." Claire hesitated. "That's really kind, but you don't have to." "No obligation," he assured her. Just networking. That's how the business world works, right? Taking the card, Claire noticed the embossed logo of Sutton Investments, but didn't immediately make the connection. Thank you, Xavier. That's unexpectedly nice of you. Sometimes the universe throws us curveballs and unexpected allies on the same day, he said with a gentle smile. Send me your resume tonight and I'll see what I can do. As Claire gathered her box and stood to leave, Xavier added, And Claire? For what it's worth, any company would be lucky to have someone who cares as much as you clearly do. She walked away from the park feeling strangely lighter than when she'd arrived, the business card tucked safely in her pocket. Despite having just lost her job, Claire felt a flicker of hope that she hadn't expected to find today, certainly not from a chance encounter with a kind stranger. Claire's studio apartment felt smaller than usual as she spread her job search materials across her tiny dining table. After sending her resume to Xavier, feeling oddly nervous about it, as if she were being evaluated, she spent hours updating her profiles on job sites and reaching out to contacts from her network. By midnight, her eyes were burning from staring at the screen, and the anxiety that had momentarily abated in the park had returned full force. Her phone pinged with a message from an unknown number. Got your resume. Already have 3 people interested in talking to you. Coffee tomorrow to discuss? Xavier. Claire stared at the message in disbelief. How could he have made progress so quickly? She typed back, That would be great. Thank you. They arranged to meet at a cafe downtown the next morning. Sleep came fitfully that night, as Claire's mind cycled between gratitude for this unexpected help and worry that she was pinning too much hope on a stranger's promises. The cafe Xavier suggested was far more upscale than Claire's unemployed budget would typically allow. As she approached in her carefully selected interview-appropriate outfit, she spotted him at a corner table, engrossed in conversation with the barista, who was laughing at something he'd said. Claire, Xavier stood as she approached, greeting her with that same warm smile from yesterday. I took the liberty of ordering you a latte, but I can get you something else if you prefer. A latte is perfect, thank you, she said, settling into the chair across from him. Today he wore a navy suit that looked even more expensive than yesterday's, though he wore it with a casual ease that suggested he wasn't trying to impress anyone. So, he began, sliding a folder across the table, I've got 3 promising leads for you. Claire opened the folder to find printed information about marketing positions at 3 well-respected companies in the city, complete with contact information and notes about each role. Xavier, this is incredible. How did you manage this so quickly? He shrugged modestly. I know people who know people, the advantage of being in business for a while. He pointed to the first sheet. Melissa at Horizon Tech is especially interested in your experience with digital transformation campaigns. I told her you'd call this afternoon. Claire looked up from the papers, studying Xavier with newfound curiosity. Why are you doing all this for me? Xavier's expression turned thoughtful. Let's just say I know what it's like to feel like the rug's been pulled out from under you. Someone helped me once when I was at my lowest point. I'm just paying it forward. There was a story there, Claire sensed, but Xavier smoothly transitioned to discussing strategy for her upcoming calls, offering insights about each company's culture and the people she'd be speaking with. His knowledge was impressive and oddly specific. You must have an amazing memory to know so much about these companies, Claire commented. Xavier's smile turned slightly mysterious. I make it my business to know about businesses. By the end of their coffee meeting, Claire had scheduled phone interviews with all 3 companies for later that week. As she gathered her things to leave, Xavier hesitated, then said, I was wondering if you'd like to meet for dinner later this week. Maybe after your interviews? As friends, he quickly added. I'd love to hear how they go. The addition of as friends, both relieved and, unexpectedly, disappointed Claire. I'd like that, she found herself saying. And Xavier? I can't thank you enough for this. Thank me when you have a job offer, he replied with a wink that sent an unexpected flutter through her chest. The interviews went surprisingly well. Claire connected especially with Melissa from Horizon Tech, who seemed genuinely impressed with her portfolio and ideas. By Friday, she had second interviews lined up with two of the companies and was feeling cautiously optimistic as she prepared to meet Xavier for dinner. He'd suggested a restaurant that Claire recognized as one of the city's finest, which made her nervous about both the expected dress code and the potential cost. When she expressed concern over text, Xavier replied, "My treat. Consider it a celebration of your successful interviews." Claire arrived at the restaurant in her best dress, a dark green wrap that brought out the color of her eyes. The maitre d' led her to a secluded corner table where Xavier was already waiting, rising to greet her with that now familiar warm smile. "You look lovely," he said, his eyes appreciative but respectful. "Thank you," Claire replied, feeling a blush rise to her cheeks. "This place is amazing, Xavier, but it's really too much. Please," he cut her off gently, "let me do this. I've had a good week too, and I'd like to celebrate with you." Throughout dinner, Claire found herself increasingly drawn to Xavier's company. He was an attentive listener, asking thoughtful questions about her interviews and offering genuine encouragement. There was no trace of condescension in his manner, despite the increasingly clear indication that he was quite successful in his field. "So, how exactly did you get into investment consulting?" Claire asked as they enjoyed their desserts, a chocolate soufflé that was possibly the most delicious thing she'd ever tasted. Xavier took a moment before answering. "I started in corporate finance, actually, worked my way up at a large firm, then struck out on my own about 7 years ago." "That must have been scary," Claire commented. "Starting your own business." "Terrifying," Xavier admitted with a chuckle. "But sometimes the biggest risks yield the greatest rewards." He looked at her intently. "Speaking of which, I have a confession to make." Claire felt a sudden nervousness. "Oh?" "I may have understated my connection to Sutton Investments when we met." He looked slightly uncomfortable. "I'm not just a consultant there. I'm the founder and CEO." Claire's fork froze halfway to her mouth. "Wait, you own Sutton Investments?" Xavier nodded, watching her reaction carefully. "I didn't want to lead with that. People tend to act differently when they know." Claire's mind raced back to the business card, the logo she hadn't paid much attention to. Sutton Investments was a major player in the city's business community. She'd read articles about the company's success and innovative approach, which meant Xavier wasn't just successful, he was wealthy. Very wealthy. "So you're—" Claire couldn't quite bring herself to say the word. "Financially comfortable," Xavier supplied with a small smile. "Yes." "Why didn't you tell me?" Claire asked, not angry but confused. Xavier leaned forward. "Because the day we met, you were vulnerable and needed help, not to be intimidated by titles or bank accounts. I wanted to help as one person to another." He paused. "I hope this doesn't change things between us." Claire took a moment to process this revelation. It explained his extensive network, the ease with which he'd arranged interviews for her, his comfortable relationship with the staff at this exclusive restaurant. But it didn't explain the genuine kindness he'd shown her, or the way he'd listened to her, as if her opinions and experiences truly mattered. "It doesn't change the fact that you've been incredibly kind to me when you had no reason to be," Claire finally said. "Though I do feel a bit embarrassed about complaining about my finances to someone who's—" She gestured vaguely. "A millionaire?" Xavier supplied with a laugh. "Claire, money doesn't make anyone immune to life's challenges or more valuable as a person. I've been where you are scared, uncertain about the future. Money just makes some problems easier to solve, not all of them." There was a wisdom in his words that resonated with Claire. "Well, in that case, Mr. Millionaire, I suppose I can allow you to pay for dinner without feeling too guilty. Xavier's relief at her teasing was visible. I appreciate that, he said with a grin. And for what it's worth, I've enjoyed getting to know you this week. Your perspective on things is refreshing. Refreshing how? Claire asked, curious. You're genuine, passionate about your work, not calculating or looking for angles. He shrugged. In my world, those qualities are rare. Claire felt a warmth spreading through her that had nothing to do with the wine they'd shared. I've enjoyed getting to know you too, Xavier. As he walked her to her car after dinner, Claire found herself wishing the evening didn't have to end. There was something about Xavier Sutton that made her feel both grounded and excited at the same time, a combination she hadn't experienced with anyone before. Thank you for tonight, she said as they reached her modest sedan. The pleasure was mine, Xavier replied, his voice soft in the evening air. Would it be too forward of me to say I'd like to see you again? And not just to discuss job prospects? Claire looked up at him, studying his face in the gentle glow of the street lamp. There was a vulnerability in his expression that touched her. Not too forward at all, she replied. I'd like that. His smile was like sunshine breaking through clouds. Good night, Claire Matthews. Good night, Xavier Sutton, she replied, suddenly aware of how much she liked the sound of his name. As she drove home, Claire couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of it all. A week ago, she'd been devastated by losing her job. Now she had promising interviews lined up and had just had dinner with a millionaire who seemed genuinely interested in her. Life certainly had a way of throwing unexpected curveballs. The following Monday brought both good news and complications. Claire received an official offer from Horizon Tech, a position that offered more responsibility and better pay than her previous job. She was ecstatic until she realized the timing conflicted with a dinner she'd planned with Xavier. I have amazing news, she told him when she called to reschedule. Horizon Tech offered me the job. They want me to start next Monday. Claire, that's fantastic. Xavier's genuine excitement warmed her. We should definitely celebrate. What about tomorrow night instead? Perfect. And Xavier? I can't thank you enough for connecting me with them. You earned it all on your own merit, he assured her. I just made an introduction. Their second dinner was even more enjoyable than the first, now that the pressure of job hunting was lifted and the truth about Xavier's position was in the open. They talked for hours, discovering shared interests in travel, contemporary art, and surprisingly, old science fiction movies. Not many investment gurus quote, "the day the earth stood still," Claire teased him. I contain multitudes, Xavier replied with a dramatic gesture that made her laugh. What about you? Any surprising hobbies or interests I should know about? Claire considered for a moment. I make handmade greeting cards. Started during college to save money and discovered I actually enjoy the creativity of it. Xavier's interest seemed genuine as he asked questions about her process and materials, never once making her feel that her craft was insignificant compared to his world of high finance. As weeks passed, Claire settled into her new position at Horizon Tech, excelling in ways that surprised even her. She and Xavier continued to see each other regularly, their relationship evolving naturally from friendship into something deeper. He introduced her to the city's art scene, while she showed him the simple pleasures of farmers' markets and community festivals he'd never made time to explore. What impressed Claire most was how Xavier never used his wealth to overshadow their experiences. When she insisted on cooking dinner for him at her tiny apartment instead of going to another upscale restaurant, he arrived with a bottle of wine and genuine enthusiasm, complimenting her simple pasta dish as if it were gourmet cuisine. This is actually better than most restaurants, he said, helping himself to seconds. There's something special about homemade food. Even in a kitchen barely big enough to turn around in? Claire asked, glancing around her compact space. Size doesn't matter nearly as much as heart, Xavier replied, his eyes holding hers in a way that made her pulse quicken. This feels more like home than my place ever does. Later, as they sat on her small balcony watching the city lights, Claire gathered the courage to ask something she'd been wondering. Xavier, can I ask you a personal question? Of course. With all your success, are you happy? Xavier's thoughtful silence told Claire the question had struck a chord. That's more complex than it should be, he finally said. I'm proud of what I've built. I enjoy the challenges. But happy? He looked out at the city sprawled before them. I think I've been too busy to notice if I was happy or not until recently. And now? Claire prompted softly. His eyes found hers again, warm and sincere. Now I'm starting to understand what real happiness might feel like. The moment hung between them, charged with unspoken feelings, until Xavier gently took her hand in his. I'm glad I sat next to you in that park, Claire Matthews. Even with all my unemployed sob story baggage? She teased lightly, trying to manage the intensity of the moment. Especially because of that, he said seriously. You showed me something real in a world where I'm constantly surrounded by facades. When he kissed her for the first time that night, under the glow of city lights and stars, Claire felt as though something fundamental had shifted in her universe, something that had nothing to do with jobs or financial security, and everything to do with the connection between two people who had found each other at exactly the right moment. 3 months into her new job, Claire was thriving. Her innovative campaign for Horizon Tech's newest product line had received industry recognition, and she'd been given additional responsibilities that challenged and excited her. Her relationship with Xavier had deepened as well, though they had both been careful to take things slowly, building a foundation of genuine friendship alongside their growing romantic feelings. It was on an ordinary Tuesday evening when Xavier called, sounding uncharacteristically nervous. Are you free this weekend? There's something I'd like to show you. Mysterious, Claire replied, curious about his tone. Should I be worried? Not at all, Xavier assured her. It's important to me. I'll pick you up Saturday morning. Pack for an overnight stay. Claire's mind raced with possibilities. They hadn't yet taken a trip together, though they'd talked about it. Should I dress up or down? Comfortable but nice, Xavier answered vaguely. Trust me? Always, Claire replied, surprised by how true that statement had become. Saturday morning arrived with perfect early autumn weather, crisp air, golden sunshine, and trees just beginning to hint at their coming color change. Xavier arrived in a vehicle Claire hadn't seen before, a practical but comfortable SUV instead of his usual luxury sedan. Where are we going that requires off-road capabilities? Claire asked, as she placed her overnight bag in the back. Xavier smiled mysteriously. You'll see. They drove for nearly 2 hours, leaving the city behind for rolling countryside that became increasingly rural. Claire was enjoying the journey and Xavier's company too much to press for details, content to watch the landscape change and share comfortable conversation. Finally, Xavier turned onto a narrow road that wound through thick woods before opening onto a clearing where a cabin sat overlooking a pristine lake. It wasn't what Claire had expected, not a luxury retreat, but a well-maintained, modest wooden structure that looked like it had been there for generations. This is beautiful, Claire said as Xavier parked. Whose place is this? Mine, Xavier replied, a note of something vulnerable in his voice. Or rather, it was my grandfather's. Now it's mine. Claire looked at him with surprise. In all their conversations, Xavier had rarely mentioned his family. You never told me about this place. I don't tell many people, Xavier admitted, getting out and coming around to open her door. It's sort of my sanctuary. The one place where I'm just me, not the CEO or the investor or any of those other roles. The significance of him bringing her here wasn't lost on Claire. As they walked toward the cabin, Xavier explained, My grandfather built this place himself in the 1960s. He was a carpenter skilled with his hands in a way I never was. I spent every summer here until I was 16. Inside, the cabin was rustic but comfortable, a large open living area with a stone fireplace, simple but quality furnishings, and wide windows that captured the stunning lake view. Family photos lined one wall, showing generations of what must be Suttons enjoying the cabin. "What happened when you were 16?" Claire asked, noticing the specificity of his statement. Xavier's expression clouded slightly. "My father decided I needed to focus on more important things: business camps, internships, college prep, the practical path to success." He moved to the windows, looking out at the lake. "My grandfather passed away that same year, left this place to me, not to my father. Said it should go to someone who understood its value." Claire came to stand beside him, sensing there was more to the story. "What does your father think of your success now?" Xavier's laugh held a hint of bitterness. "He measures it differently than I do. For him, it's about the right connections, appearances, status. We don't see each other much these days." It explained so much about Xavier: his disinterest in flaunting his wealth, his genuine appreciation for simple pleasures, his understanding of what truly mattered beyond material success. "Thank you for bringing me here," Claire said softly, "for sharing this with me." Xavier turned to her, his expression earnest. "I wanted you to see this part of me, to understand where I come from, what shaped me." He took her hands in his. "You know the CEO, the businessman. This is the real me, the kid who spent summers fishing and hiking and watching stars over that lake." The tenderness of the moment wrapped around them like a warm blanket. "I think I see all of you, Xavier," Claire said, "and I like every version I've met so far." They spent the day exploring the property, hiking the surrounding trails, kayaking on the lake, and preparing a simple dinner together in the cabin's rustic kitchen. As evening fell, Xavier built a fire in the stone hearth, and they settled on the worn leather couch with glasses of wine. "I have a confession to make," Xavier said, his arm comfortably around Claire's shoulders. "Another one?" Claire teased. "You're just full of secrets, aren't you?" Xavier's expression turned serious. "That day in the park when we met, it wasn't entirely coincidence." Claire sat up straighter, giving him her full attention. "What do you mean?" "I'd seen you before, at charity events where Pritchard Media was involved. You probably never noticed me, why would you? But I noticed you." Xavier looked slightly embarrassed by this admission. "You always seemed so passionate about your work, so engaged with people. Different from the typical networking crowd." "So when you saw me in the park?" Claire began, trying to process this revelation. "I recognized you immediately," Xavier confirmed. "When I realized you'd lost your job, it seemed like fate giving me an opportunity to actually meet you properly." Claire wasn't sure how to feel about this. So helping me find a job was what? A way to get close to me? "No," Xavier said firmly. "Helping you was the right thing to do, regardless. I would have made those calls even if you'd never spoken to me again." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Claire had come to recognize as a sign of his discomfort. "I just wanted you to know the full truth. I didn't engineer our meeting, but I did recognize an opportunity when it presented itself." Claire considered this information, studying Xavier's face in the firelight. There was no manipulation or calculation in his expression, only honest vulnerability, and perhaps a touch of fear that his confession might change things between them. "So you're telling me that even before we met, you noticed me?" Claire asked, a small smile forming. Xavier nodded, looking relieved at her tone. "You're rather noticeable, Claire Matthews." "I think that's possibly the most flattering thing anyone's ever told me," she said, leaning back against him. "That a millionaire business mogul spotted me across a crowded room and thought I was worth knowing." Xavier tightened his arm around her, You have no idea how extraordinary you are, do you? As they sat together watching the flames, Claire realized something important. Despite his wealth and status, Xavier was showing her his most authentic self, his childhood haven, his family history, even his initial attraction to her. There were no pretenses between them, no power imbalances despite their different financial situations. Just two people finding unexpected connection in a complex world. Later that night, as moonlight spilled through the bedroom windows and the sounds of the forest surrounded them, their relationship deepened in the most natural way, tender, passionate, and filled with the kind of honest emotion that neither had expected to find. Claire felt as though every step in her life, even losing her job, had been leading her to this precise moment of connection with someone who saw her completely and valued her for exactly who she was. The morning brought sunlight streaming through the windows and the gentle sounds of Xavier moving around in the kitchen. Claire stretched contentedly, wrapping herself in one of Xavier's shirts before padding out to find him preparing breakfast. "Good morning," he greeted her with a smile that contained all the warmth of the previous night. "Coffee?" "Definitely," Claire replied, accepting the mug he offered and leaning up to kiss him. "I could get used to mornings like this." Something flashed in Xavier's eyes, hope, perhaps, or possibility. "I'd like that," he said simply. Over breakfast, they talked easily about everything and nothing, comfortable in the new intimacy between them. Claire found herself imagining more weekends like this, more mornings waking up beside Xavier, and the thought filled her with unexpected happiness. "What are you thinking about?" Xavier asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. "The future," Claire admitted. "How unpredictable life is." Xavier reached across the table to take her hand. "3 months ago, you were sitting on a park bench having the worst day of your professional life. And now I'm having breakfast with a millionaire in his secret cabin in the woods," Claire finished with a laugh. "Not where I expected to be." "Life's best gifts are rarely the ones we're expecting," Xavier said, his thumb tracing patterns on her palm. "Claire, I need you to know something important." Her heart quickened at his serious tone. "What is it?" "I'm falling in love with you," Xavier said simply, his eyes never leaving hers. "And it has nothing to do with you needing help, or me having resources. It's just you, your humor, your resilience, your kindness, the way you see the world. I've never met anyone like you." Claire felt tears prick at her eyes, unexpected emotion rising in her throat. "I'm falling in love with you too," she admitted, despite my best efforts to be cautious and practical. Xavier's smile was radiant. Being practical is highly overrated. As they drove back to the city that afternoon, Claire felt as though she was returning to her normal life, somehow fundamentally changed. The connection she and Xavier had forged in the simplicity of the cabin felt stronger and more genuine than anything she'd experienced before. "I have a proposition for you," Xavier said, as they neared the city limits. "That sounds intriguing," Claire replied, noticing the slight nervousness in his voice. "Sutton Investments is launching a new initiative focused on supporting small businesses and startups," Xavier explained. "We need someone to head up the marketing and public relations aspect, someone who understands how to communicate authentic values, not just corporate talking points." Claire turned to look at him, sensing where this was heading. "Xavier, before you say anything," he continued quickly, "this isn't charity or nepotism. I've seen your work at Horizon Tech. You're exactly the kind of talent we need. The position would report to our marketing director, not directly to me. There would be clear boundaries." Claire considered his words carefully. The opportunity sounded fascinating, potentially even more aligned with her values than her current position. But working at Xavier's company, so soon after beginning their relationship? "I appreciate the offer," she said thoughtfully, "but I'm concerned about complications. What would people think?" They'd think I hired an exceptionally qualified marketing professional with a proven track record, Xavier replied. Your credentials stand on their own, Claire. Let me think about it, she requested. This isn't something I want to decide impulsively. Xavier nodded, clearly respecting her caution. Of course. Take all the time you need. In the weeks that followed, Claire deliberated carefully about Xavier's job offer. She loved her position at Horizon Tech, but the opportunity at Sutton Investments aligned perfectly with her long-term career goals. After thorough consideration and lengthy discussions with Xavier about maintaining professional boundaries, she decided to accept the position. I'll need to give Horizon 4 weeks' notice, she told Xavier over dinner at her apartment. They've been good to me, and I want to ensure a smooth transition. I respect that, Xavier replied. And Claire? Thank you for trusting me, trusting us enough to take this step. Her transition to Sutton Investments went more smoothly than Claire had anticipated. Xavier was scrupulous about maintaining professional distance at work, and Claire quickly proved herself to the marketing team through her innovative ideas and work ethic. If there were whispers about their relationship, they faded quickly as her colleagues recognized her competence. 6 months into their relationship, Claire had settled into both her new professional role and her personal life with Xavier. They still maintained their separate residences, though they spent most nights together, sometimes at his elegant penthouse, but just as often at her cozy apartment, which Xavier claimed felt more like home. It was on a snowy December evening, as they walked through the park where they'd first met, that Xavier stopped beneath a canopy of lights strung through the trees. Do you remember what you told me that first day? He asked, snow collecting on his dark hair. You said you helped companies find their voice. Claire smiled at the memory. I was trying to sound professional while having an emotional breakdown. You helped me find something more important than my voice, Xavier said, suddenly serious. You helped me find my heart. Before Claire could respond, Xavier dropped to one knee in the freshly fallen snow. I had a whole speech planned, he said, looking up at her with such love that Claire's breath caught. About how meeting you changed everything, how you see the real me beyond the bank accounts and business deals. But right now, all I can say is that I love you, Claire Matthews, and I want to spend the rest of my life showing you just how much. He pulled a small box from his pocket, opening it to reveal a stunning yet tasteful diamond ring. Will you marry me? Claire's heart felt too full for her chest, tears of joy warming her cheeks despite the cold air. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes. As Xavier slipped the ring onto her finger and stood to kiss her, snowflakes swirling around them in the glow of the lights, Claire marveled at life's unexpected journey. 6 months ago, she'd sat in this very park, devastated by the loss of her job, never imagining that the kind stranger offering help would become the love of her life. You know, she said as they finally broke apart, both breathless and grinning, losing my job might have been the best thing that ever happened to me. Xavier laughed, holding her close in the gentle snowfall. I prefer to think the best thing was that I happened to be working in the park that day instead of my office. Some might call it coincidence. But we know better, Claire finished, looking up at the man who had entered her life when she least expected it and changed everything. It was fate. Their wedding the following spring was an intimate affair held at Xavier's cabin by the lake, with only close friends and family in attendance. Claire's parents, initially wary of their daughter's whirlwind romance with a millionaire, had quickly warmed to Xavier after seeing how genuinely he adored their daughter. He looks at you like you're the most precious thing in the world, her mother had commented during wedding preparations. Because she is, Xavier had replied simply, overhearing the comment as he entered the room. They exchanged vows on the dock overlooking the lake, surrounded by wildflowers and the natural beauty that had formed the backdrop of their deepening relationship. Xavier had surprised Claire by renovating the cabin's interior to create more comfortable living space while carefully preserving its rustic charm and family history. A place for new memories alongside the old ones, he'd explained when showing her the updates. After the ceremony, as their guests celebrated in the large tent set up on the property, Xavier led Claire down to the lake's edge for a moment of privacy. "Happy?" he asked, his arms wrapped around her waist as they looked out over the water shimmering in the setting sun. "Beyond words," Claire replied, leaning back against him. "Though I'm still getting used to the idea that I'm now Mrs. Sutton." "I'm still getting used to the idea that you said yes," Xavier murmured against her hair. Claire turned in his arms to face him. As if there was ever any doubt. "I spent years building a company, acquiring wealth, thinking those things would bring fulfillment," Xavier said reflectively. "It took losing you to understand what truly matters." "You never lost me," Claire corrected gently. Xavier shook his head with a smile. "I mean before I found you. I was lost, Claire. Successful on paper but missing something essential." His fingers traced the curve of her cheek. "You brought me back to myself." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light across the lake, Claire recognized the perfect symmetry of their journey. She had lost her job and found a friend in Xavier. He had acquired wealth, but found true richness in loving her. Both had discovered that life's most valuable treasures often come disguised as misfortune, the curveballs that send us spinning in unexpected directions toward experiences we never could have planned. "We should get back to our guests," Claire finally said, though reluctant to break the moment. Xavier nodded, taking her hand. "We have a lifetime of moments like this ahead of us," he promised. And as they walked back toward the celebration, Claire felt the absolute certainty that even if she could somehow return to that devastating day 6 months ago and avoid losing her job, she wouldn't change a thing. Every step of her journey, including the painful ones, had led her exactly where she was meant to be, into the arms of the man who loved her not for what she could do or what she represented, but simply for who she was. 2 years into their marriage, Claire and Xavier had found a rhythm that balanced their professional ambitions with their personal life. Claire had excelled in her role at Sutton Investments, eventually being promoted to Director of Social Impact and Marketing, where she led initiatives that aligned perfectly with her values of helping communities and small businesses thrive. Xavier had grown too, evolving from a primarily profit-driven investor to one who increasingly considered the social impact of his business decisions. Under Claire's influence, Sutton Investments had launched several successful community development projects that were changing lives while still delivering returns to investors, proving that doing good and doing well weren't mutually exclusive. They'd settled into a beautiful home halfway between the city and the lake cabin, allowing them to maintain their professional lives while having easy access to their favorite retreat. The house was spacious but warm, reflecting both their tastes, elegant enough for entertaining business associates when necessary, but comfortable enough to feel like a genuine home. It was on a crisp fall morning, similar to the day Xavier had first brought her to the cabin, that Claire sat at their kitchen island watching her husband prepare breakfast, a Saturday ritual he insisted on maintaining despite their busy schedules. "I have some news," Claire said, trying to keep her voice casual despite the excitement bubbling inside her. Xavier looked up from the pancake batter he was mixing. "Good news, I hope. You've been looking a bit pale lately. I've been worried you're working too hard on that new initiative." Claire smiled, touched by his concern. "It's not work-related. At least, not directly." She took a deep breath. "We're going to need to convert one of the guest rooms into a nursery in about 7 months." Xavier froze, the whisk suspended mid-stir as her words registered. "Claire," he said, his voice suddenly hoarse with emotion. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" She nodded, tears of joy filling her eyes. "I'm pregnant, Xavier. We're going to have a baby." The whisk clattered against the bowl as Xavier rounded the island in two quick strides, gathering Claire into his arms with a care that made her laugh through her tears. "A baby," he whispered against her hair, his voice filled with wonder. "Our baby." Claire leaned back to see his face, finding it transformed with a joy so pure it took her breath away. "Are you happy?" "Happy doesn't begin to cover it," Xavier said, his hands gently cradling her face. "Claire, you've given me everything I never knew I wanted: love, purpose, a true partnership, and now, a family of our own." He placed a tender hand on her still flat stomach. "I didn't think it was possible to love you more than I already do, but somehow, you keep proving me wrong." In the months that followed, they prepared for their child's arrival with the same thoughtful consideration they brought to all aspects of their life together. Xavier surprised Claire by suggesting they spend the final months of her pregnancy at the cabin, away from the stress of the city. "I can manage most things remotely," he explained when Claire expressed concern about his business responsibilities. "And what I can't? Well, that's why I have an excellent executive team. Some things are more important." Those months at the lake became some of the most precious of their relationship. They took long walks along the shoreline when weather permitted, planned for their child's future while sitting by the fireplace during spring rainstorms, and transformed one of the cabin's rooms into a nursery filled with handcrafted furniture Xavier insisted on making himself. "My grandfather would have made these for his great-grandchild," Xavier explained as he sanded the edges of a beautifully crafted crib. "It seems right to carry on that tradition." Claire, watching him work with a dedication that transcended his usual precision, felt a new dimension of love for this man who balanced boardroom power with such tender attention to creating a legacy for their child. Their daughter, Evelyn Grace Sutton, arrived on a perfect summer morning, entering the world with a determined cry that made both her parents laugh through their tears of joy. "She has your spirit," Xavier whispered as he held his newborn daughter for the first time, his confident demeanor completely undone by the tiny being in his arms. "Strong and beautiful from the very beginning." "And your eyes?" Claire observed softly, exhausted but radiant. "Those are definitely Sutton eyes." As they settled into parenthood, Claire often reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this point. 3 years ago, she had been devastated by the loss of a job she thought defined her worth. Now she understood that what had seemed like an ending had actually been the beginning of something far more meaningful, a love that had transformed both their lives in ways neither could have imagined. One evening, as Xavier rocked their 6-month-old daughter to sleep while humming a lullaby his grandfather had once sung to him, Claire captured the moment in her heart this powerful, successful man completely centered in the simple joy of fatherhood. "I love watching you with her," she said softly, as Xavier gently laid the sleeping infant in her crib. "Sometimes I still can't believe she's real," Xavier admitted, his voice hushed as they slipped out of the nursery. "That any of this is real." They moved to the porch, settling into the swing that overlooked the lake now silvered with moonlight. Xavier's arm around her shoulders, Claire's head resting against him, a position of comfort they'd found countless times over the years. "Remember when we sat in that park? Both of us pretending you weren't having a crisis and I wasn't completely captivated by you from the first moment?" Xavier asked, his fingers absently playing with her hair. Claire smiled at the memory. "You were so kind. No agenda, no expectations, just genuine kindness to a stranger." "Not completely without agenda," Xavier corrected with a chuckle. "I definitely hoped I'd see you again." "And now you're stuck with me forever," Claire teased, nestling closer into his embrace. "The best fate I could have asked for," Xavier replied, his tone shifting from playful to sincere. "You know, before you, I measured success by numbers in bank accounts and investment returns. You taught me to measure it by moments like this, by connection, by purpose, by love." Claire lifted her face to his, studying the features that had become as familiar to her as her own, yet still caused her heart to quicken. For someone who deals with financial risk for a living, taking a chance on a jobless woman in a park turned out to be your best investment. Without question, Xavier agreed, leaning down to kiss her gently. The returns have been beyond calculation. As they sat together in comfortable silence, watching the moonlight dance across the lake that had witnessed their love story unfold, Claire felt a perfect contentment. Life would continue to bring challenges and changes. Careers would evolve, their daughter would grow, perhaps more children would join their family. But the foundation they had built together was unshakable, formed in the unexpected meeting of two souls who had each found in the other exactly what they didn't know they were looking for. What had begun with a job loss and a chance encounter had blossomed into a life richer than either could have designed, proof that sometimes life's greatest gifts arrive in packages we never expected, at moments when we least anticipate them, from people we didn't know we needed until they appeared. And for Claire Matthews Sutton, that unexpected gift had taken the form of a kind stranger on a park bench. A millionaire who saw beyond her temporary circumstances to the person she truly was and loved her completely for exactly that person.